Good morning, everyone. So exactly 3 years ago, I gave another TEDx talk at IIM Bangalore, where I work now. And so in preparation for today's talk, I went through that recording and I asked myself, what could I do better? How could I improve? How can it get any better than this? And the thing that popped up for me was, while there was so much information content, it was very useful, it was a very serious talk. And I started wondering, can a TEDx talk actually be fun for the speaker and for the audience? And that is part of the agenda for today. So as long as I've had fun and as long as you've had fun, my goal for today at least has been met. And why am I telling you about this? Because one of the things I want to talk about today is cultivating an innovation mindset and bringing it into our works and into our life. And that's exactly what I'm doing with this speech itself. I've spoken before, and let's try something new. Let's see if it can get better. Let's see if we can have fun along with that information dissemination. So when it comes to innovation, and most of you are here studying in a business school as well, and we hear innovation in the context of technology, products, solutions, but we don't use it in the area of our own lives, our own careers. How about thinking of what we do, how we live as a continuous crafting of our lives, as a continuous innovation where we want to keep asking, how can we do it better? What else can we do? What can we add? How does it get any better than this? So that is in the mindset of innovation, and I'm going to outline two habits that we can cultivate. These are really thinking habits, right? So I study psychology, and all the work that I do is really about what goes on inside the brain. So coming from there, I'm going to share with you two things that you can shift in your own thinking habits and patterns that will help cultivate this spirit of innovation and bring it to whatever you do. So the first one is technically called integrative thinking. Defined by Roger Martin and taught in business schools across the world. It's a kind of thinking that managers are invited to bring into solving wicked problems. You know, problems that at the face of it, they seem like they have no solution, or places where you're stuck, where you want this and you you think you can have only one of them, and so you have to compromise. But integrative thinking says, well, no. When you're in a situation like that where you feel, there's no solution, there's nothing that will work here, I have to compromise, don't compromise. Ask why, ask what else is possible. Try and come up with something where your needs are met. Let me give you a very small, simple example to understand how to do this. And the first step in doing this actually is to start asking questions. Now this might seem very, very simple, but it's at the heart of any kind of training in trying to think innovatively. We just want to practice asking questions. So here's a story. It was summer vacation, and my son, who was quite little then, comes running up to me and he asks me, Mama, do you have enough money? And this is the kind of question all parents want to hear, right, from the kids. I'm like, oh my God, okay, what happened? And I was like, why? And then, because I had no other answer, so I was like, why? And he says, I want to go to a 5-star hotel for lunch. And I'm shocked again, and then, you know, my brain is filled with all these kinds of chatter. Oh my God, am I sending him to an elite school? We'll have to drive all the way. Which 5-star hotel? How much will it cost? What is it? But, you know, somehow I sort of pulled my brain back from all those conclusions, and I asked, why do you want to go? I was curious, you know, why do you want to go to a 5-star hotel? Because, and he says, it'll be nice and chill there. It was summer, April in Bangalore. I didn't have an AC at home, and it was very hot. And he wants to feel cool because he's felt cool in 5-star hotels before. So he wants to go there for lunch. So I actually tell him, okay, come, let's go to my office. I have an AC in my office. I live on campus. It's a 5-minute walk away. Bring your crayons, some toys, some puzzles. We'll hang out there in the afternoon, the hottest part of the day. Shall we do that? It worked. And win-win solution. Now the interesting thing is, how did we arrive at this win-win solution? What helped? By asking why. If I hadn't asked the question why, I would have assumed that he wanted to eat lots of variety of food, that huge spread. Or I would have assumed that there's something else about the 5-star hotel, maybe the luxury or something else, right? But asking why brought out the real need. And then we could create a solution that addressed that without me having to drive all the way in the traffic and spend all that money, which maybe I wasn't so keen on doing. So that is really the spirit of integrative thinking and the power of asking these questions. Now, I also teach students a lot on courses on careers, and people come to me for career coaching. And one of the things, for examples, that I often find people stuck with is where they think, man, I have to choose this or this and I can't decide. So they've already identified two things and they said, I have to choose this or this, and that's it. So it's a world of two things from which you have to decide. So in integrative thinking, it's never a world where you have just two options. You always have infinite options. And how do you come up with this idea that you have always infinite options? Because you start looking at what you need underneath these things. For example, students often ask me, should I stay in India or should I go abroad? At the face of it, it seems like it requires a compromise. You can't stay in India at the same time, simultaneously, one leg here and one leg abroad. But if you start asking questions, what do you want when you go abroad? Why is it that you want to go abroad? Maybe it's for experience, maybe it's for money, maybe it's for cultural experience, maybe it's to travel, for exposure. Now you start getting at reasons. Why do you want to stay in India? Maybe it's to be with your mother, maybe it's to be with your girlfriend, maybe it's because you feel connected, maybe you like the climate. Now you're getting into what are the needs. Now when you find, and it's going to be different for each person, right? So when you find this real need and this real need, and you say, now can I create a new solution, find a new option, create a new possibility that meets both of these? Guess what? Many times, yes, it's not guaranteed, but you can put these two together in many different possible ways. And that is innovation. That's the spirit of innovation in your own lives. And from experience, I'll tell you this, if you go deeper and deeper and deeper, you usually always find a way to not compromise and to create what you want without having to give up on, you know, what you think your constraints are. Okay, so let me go to the second habit actually, okay. So this is about asking questions. There's another very powerful mental habit that we can also cultivate, and this is about what not to do, which is not to create generalized conclusions. Because here's what generalized conclusions do. They always stick us into a limited space, and then we have to operate out of that. I'll give you a story again. Okay, so this happened when I was teaching, I was doing a training program for senior officials of the Indian Economic Service. So imagine a group full of economists in their 50s, okay? And within the first 10 minutes of the very first class, a gentleman in the front row puts his hand up and he tells me, "Madam, I will tell you the truth. I have attended many workshops in my life. All this HR training doesn't work." I was stumped. I was like, okay, what do I do? And clearly, he believed in what he said. And I'm sure he had experiences which led him to form that conclusion. So instead of negating his truth, because that was his truth, I asked him if I could share a story from my own life instead, and he agreed. So I told him this other story, which is also about my son, another summer vacation. My son came back after spending a couple of days at my parents' house, where my sister had also come with her children about the same age. My son comes back home and he tells me, "I hate books." And I'm like, okay, wow. I mean, for me, that's like sacrilege. I love books. I have 4 books in my suitcase right now. I write books. I'm like, okay. I asked him what happened. And turns out he had been really looking forward to play with his cousins, the other kids. Usually they get together, summer vacation, winter vacation, and they play. This vacation, the other kids had found their love of reading, And they had brought their books along and they were cuddled on the sofa and they were reading. And my son had no one to play with. So I asked him, why didn't you also read? Why don't you try to read? And he says, but books are stupid. I don't like books. I'm like, okay, that's the conclusions, but what do? I was like, okay, fine. I said, well, I teased him. I said, that's not very fair to books, right? Because you haven't even met all the books out there. Do you think it would be more accurate to say you don't like the books you've seen so far? Now, my son is very, very logical since he's been a baby. So he's sort of, dimag mein thoda dent hua. He was like, okay, I don't like the books I've read so far. We left it there. That's it. In the next couple of months, every time the topic of books would come up, and if you're a little kid growing up and going to school, everyone around you is going to, push books into your faces and talk to you about reading and all of that. But every time it came up and every time he said something like books are stupid or I don't like books or these books are silly, I would give him this quizzical look, and then he would correct himself into the books I've seen so far are silly. The books in this shop are not nice. So he would, really he started correcting or rephrasing himself. And about 6 months later, we were in the airport, we were going somewhere, and he spotted the biography of Virat Kohli in the airport bookshop with Kohli's picture on it. And he's a huge fan of Kohli, who isn't? Okay, so, and he asked for it, and I got it, and he read it on the plane. And when we came back, I actually heard him call up his grandmother, my mother, and tell her on the phone, Pati, I actually found a book I like. And since then, he's been finding other books that he likes. So when I shared this story, this gentleman, this IES officer, he had tears in his eyes. Clearly, something had shifted for him. We didn't have to talk about it anymore, but he was the most present and enthusiastic person in the entire workshop. And at the end of the program, he had the most powerful takeaways. When his brain was ready to change, it was easy to change. Now the thing is, cognitive science has known this for a long time. And we talk about it, we teach it. You guys have learned it, right, about confirmation bias. When we have a belief, a conclusion about how things are, our brain is set up to not receive any new information that negates that belief. And we have a tendency to keep recreating whatever falls in line with our own conclusions and beliefs so that we can validate it. So if you have a belief that I don't like books, then you are, with that belief, you've actually decreased the chances of even physically, visibly it's called bounded awareness, seeing books that you might like, and therefore, forbid, you just pick up something and you actually like it. Our brain is powerful enough to negate that physical sensation of joy, the experience, the emotion can be negated by the brain just because the brain wants to hold on to the belief and always keep proving itself and its beliefs right. Our brains are very, very powerful. They're also very, very dumb. Okay, so these kinds of, so stay away from generalized conclusions because they're not even true. I'll give you another context where generalized conclusions, I find it affecting a lot of people. Suppose you take a maths test and you fail in it. What is more accurate? What will you conclude from that incident? I failed in this test. I am hopeless in maths. Or I'm a failure in life in general. I'm hopeless. Okay? So we can conclude at different levels, right? Very specific to very general. This one is not as limiting. Yeah, I failed in this test, true. What can I do? What was this test about? How can it change? Yeah, right? I am a failure. That's it. I'm hopeless, so I'm going to go around life doing things to keep proving to myself more and more, validating the belief that I'm hopeless, I'm a failure. And it's not true. The data just is that you failed in one test. I don't have a flair for maths. That's also not true. That one test was one kind of maths set up at one day. So why are we concluding things about ourselves and making them big when we know that these conclusions are what we hold as our identity, what we continue to create, and what is going to limit us from doing, from innovating in our own lives? Now, these kinds of conclusions that we make, sometimes they take the form of judgments. And they take the form of judgments. We call them judgments when there's a strong element of good, bad, right, wrong. So my son said, I don't like books, but if books are bad, now that's a judgment. And these judgments are even more sticky because apart from validating our beliefs, now we are also like, we don't want to make ourselves wrong by doing something that we have decided is wrong. So another young man, actually, pretty much, similar age as many of you, had come to me for career coaching, and he actually wanted to discuss about possibilities in academia. He had finished his education, worked in the industry with an organization for a couple of years, and he said, ma'am, I have decided the corporate world is not for me. I'm done with the corporate world. I want to move into academia. I hate the corporate world. And I was like, you know what? Wait. Let's have this conversation, but don't hate the corporate world. You haven't seen all of it. You haven't done all of it. Let's leave that aside and let's talk about what you want to explore in academia. Because I did that mistake years ago, I had this conclusion, I hate the corporate world, and I shut it out. I would not shut it out anymore. Okay, but when I told him this, don't shut it out, his response was, but then ma'am, how do I justify to myself that I'm making the right choice? And I was, well, you know what, you're making a choice. You don't have to justify it to anyone. Sometimes when we want to justify our choices to ourselves, we force something else to be wrong. So if you're thinking of going, you don't have to do that, because by doing that, it's a trap, right? So if you're planning a vacation, you can go to Goa, you can go to Nepal, and you choose to go to Goa. Do you tell yourself, oh, but mountains are terrible, I fall ill in mountains, I don't like mountains, nowadays there's violence in mountains. Do you have to say all those things in order to say, I want to go to Goa and enjoy the waves and have some fun? No, you can just say, I want to go to Goa because I want to have some fun with the waves. The mountains are great. I love mountains also, and I'll go there some other time, in some other context, for something else, right? So you want to do research, you want to explore academia, great. But don't make the whole corporate world bad, evil, wrong, because tomorrow there might be a way that you can craft your life. You have a wonderful opportunity to do something very interesting which you like, but it's in the corporate world. And your brain is going to say, no, that's wrong. I can't go there because that's evil. Why? Why put all these extra blocks and barriers in place? And I have to be mindful of the time. So I'm going to do a very quick wrap up, okay? So basically, these things that we carry on our shoulders, our brains, they are amazing machines, potent machines. They can be our best friends or our worst enemies. So please, but we can program them. Right? So asking questions, staying away from generalized conclusions, especially in the form of judgments, these are things we can train our brain to do. We can catch ourselves, we can challenge the assumptions we make, and we can get into the habit of asking questions. Neurons that fire together, wire together. So create that habit, dream on, and innovate on in your lives, in your works, and wish you all the very best. And we're done. Thank you.